Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Cheryl Lentz, and I am so very sorry I missed our time together for our presentation. I am so very sorry. That little rascal of COVID is very unpredictable and quite the adventure. So, as promised, I'm offering you a little bit of extra to be able to make it up to you. First, I will do this video, and it'll be on my YouTube channel, and I'll send it over to Linda so she can share it with you. Second bonus is going to give you a one-on-one time with me. If you'd like to be able to set some time for a one-on-one complimentary session with me, I will send along my calendar for you so you can book a time with me. And I'm happy to spend some time with you because as you'll discover throughout this presentation, I will also include the PowerPoint. This is not a video platform that includes slides, and quite candidly, I'm not a fan of PowerPoint. PowerPoint, as I like to tell my students, if somebody's reading your PowerPoint, they're not listening to you. And I want us to have this connection today, to be able to show you what I do and how I do it, and how this might suggest some other options for you to be able to think about going forward. So today we're going to be talking about this thing I call the systems efficiency metric. The goal is to increase productivity and to increase your leadership acumen. So I want to make sure that you understand what this is and why we do it. Included in my PowerPoint slides, you will see my bio. I have been a college prof for over 23 years. I love technology. I have a sizzle reel, if you like, do a lot of presentations all over the world. You can see my bio that I use for class, give you a little bit about my background. I have 4 degrees if you want to have the academic credentials, bachelor, 2 masters, and a doctorate. I have been teaching for more than 23 years, former military wife. That means I've lived all over the world, having moved more than 38 times. I lived in Japan and Tokyo for a bit back in the late 90s. And I'm also a business owner. I own a publishing company. I help people make their dreams come true by publishing their books. I personally have been published, I think it's 58 times now. Helps if you own the company. It also helps if you're a college professor. And it also helps if you have something to say. And this is my gift to you, is to be able to look at some of these publications, and I'll have a free gift for you as well. So part of this is, what do you have to say that the world needs to hear? And this idea of this efficiency metric is something I've been doing for more than 20 years, because quite frankly, how we do one thing is how we do everything. And there's this idea of systems thinking. Peter Senge perfected it in his 5th discipline years and years ago. It was a book that so profoundly affected me during my doctoral study that I started taking a look at, how do we do anything? How do you drive a car? How do you get up in the morning? We all have our routines. We have our systems. I have a way of teaching my students, particularly at the doctoral level, although I teach a little bit different depending on the modality, depending on the level, undergrad, master's, doc, and depending on the student. The idea of andragogy and pedagogy, as it were. Andragogy is the science and art of teaching adults. Pedagogy, the art and science of teaching children. So the idea is simply how you're going to be able to create whatever it is you do every single day. Many of you are executives. You sit in the C-suite. You lead and manage that which goes on in your organization. The question is, what do you know? And how do you know it? And how do you know that it's the most efficient way forward? Hence, the systems efficiency metric. We have to measure it. And this is something that my students probably get a little annoyed with me, as do my clients in there, because I always am asking that proverbial 4-year-old, why? How do you know this? Evidence-based practice is the foundation of research. And the point is how do you know if something works? You're CEO, if you're in the C-suite, you have to measure, you have to know. You just can't throw spaghetti against the wall and hope something sticks. You are making calculated risks. You are making determinations of being able to decide, how do we measure what works? How do we increase productivity? And how do we know that maybe it needs to be tweaked? Something that worked last week may not work this week. COVID is an interesting dynamic because we live in a post-COVID world, and things that may have worked before, not so much. Others have worked better. See, this is the part that many people thought COVID was such a disaster for everything, for every time. And the answer is that's not true. Many people thrived post-COVID. Why? Form follows function, efficiency. The old ways didn't work, and we had to be really, really quick to switch, to pivot. to transition, to find a different way forward. Those who sat on the sidelines and watched weren't nearly as successful as those who jumped in to be able to say, okay, what's going to work and why? Let's try a few things. You don't score if you don't shoot. And many people were so afraid to fail, they decided not to be able to do this at all. So I want you to look at some of these things with systems thinking. I want you to look at these things with Daniel Goleman with regard to social intelligence and emotional intelligence. We are emotional beings. And I know an awful lot of you feel that you're dealing with chaos, but believe it or not, there's order in chaos theory. There's this idea of mindset versus skill set, and then of course leadership acumen. Those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. And I want you to be able to make sure that you always look at this and say, what is the best system for going forward? Because again, Peter Senge never said this, but it's based and predicated on his belief, the fact that how we do one thing is how we do everything. If you are a timely person, a busy person, no matter what you do, you take it out of context, and you're still going to have these same personalities. I like to tell my students, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's still a duck. But for some of my students, it's amazing. They do amazing things in the business landscape. They go to school, and suddenly they leave those skills in their business jacket. I think it's amazing that when we look at the duck is still a duck, regardless of context. We still need organizational skills. We still need time management skills. We still need research skills. Whatever it is that I teach my students. For example, I'll tell you a quick story. When I went to undergrad, I was at the University of Illinois, spring semester, I'm just about to graduate, and I was really disappointed and a little annoyed. Why? I finally figured it out. I figured out how to go to school. Can you imagine if I would have figured out how to go to school freshman year? My career might have been just a little bit less interesting. I sit before you as a doctoral scholar with 4 degrees when I almost didn't graduate my first semester. Why? Oh, all kinds of reasons in there. However, the biggest one is that it was a shift in career. What I had planned to do the rest of my life and what I wanted to be when I grew up was a musician, and it didn't happen. And there were some interesting adventures. You want to watch some of the stuff, another topic, but my TED Talk is all about the idea of failure and what happened to me in my college career. But my point is I recovered and I understood how to go to school. So fast forward, my first master takes me 3 years. My second master takes me less than one. And I actually wasn't taking it too seriously because it was during COVID. I was doing it because it was a different modality. I was using competency-based learning, which is a new modality for me. I had made a smart aleck remark to the university. I said, hey, I'll go back to school if somebody else pays for it this time. And they said they would. So I did. But I really believe that because of the systems and how I teach my students how to go to school, and the systems are time management, how to do research, how to be able to go to school, how to be able to balance your time, both your personal life, your work-related life, as well as your school life, how you're going to write a paper, how you're going to study for an exam, how. And my YouTube channel is filled with these systems. And once we establish these systems, particularly at the doctoral level, by the time they get to me as a chair, now the systems are in place. It's just rinse, repeat. It's the same thing with you. And I know it doesn't matter. Business fundamentals are business fundamentals for a reason. Again, how we do one thing is how we do everything. So if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's still a duck. So whether at your level, whether at the CEO level, whether at the board of directors level, I do sit on the board for several organizations, it's still the fundamentals of how are we going to create that system so that we know what works and what doesn't. Part of that is a maintaining of your emotions. You know that. This is something that most people, it's not that we want not to be emotional beings. It is something that we want to have the ability to find a system for managing our emotions more effectively. Because the one thing you're going to hear from your followers, your subordinates, again, managers use subordinates, leaders have followers, that part of this is learning to be able to, it's about connection. Think about what happened during COVID, that to me the most important lesson was isolation. And this was the hardest part for me recovering from COVID, is the fact that it's a solo journey. You can be with the doctors, you can use all of the drinking and chicken soup and all of the systems we've over the years, but the body is going to take time. And it's going to have something that we're going to need to move forward with that system. And this is the part where you need to apply that system efficiency metric. What do you do? How best do you do it? What are the protocols? What are the best practices? Rinse, repeat. I know it sounds eloquently simple, but if everybody were doing it, we wouldn't have nearly the issues that we have, because I know I have a lot of students that I'm constantly asking them, a lot of clients, I'm constantly asking them, how do you know? How do you know it works? How do you measure it? How do you know what the system can do? Here's a technique. Start at the end and work backwards. Outcome-based approach is how I teach a lot of my classes. As we start at the end, we know exactly where we want to go, and then we reverse engineering how best to get there. How did I come up with this? Not a newsflash, the fact that I have no sense of direction. For any of you who know me personally, it's true. I absolutely have no sense of direction. There are many, many things I do well. Direction's not one of them. This cell phone is the single best tool that I have, because when I have a direction need and I'm going somewhere, I type into Dr. Google over here and I give him the address and he gets me 99.9% of the time exactly where I need to go. But think of that lesson for life. How we do anything is how we do everything. Before I had digital means, I had a Garmin. I would print out directions. I would do systems so that where I would go and when I would get there, I would have a system. And I call it my get late factor. I always left at least anywhere from a half an hour to an hour prior to where I needed to go to make sure I would get there on time in case I got lost. Or not in case, but usually when I got lost. But that's the whole point of having a system with using this outcome-based approach. If I put the address into the GPS, 99.9% of the time, I'm going to get exactly where I go. SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I know exactly where I'm going to go, and now the question is how best to get there. Does Google always take me the same way every time? No, of course not. There's going to be an accident, there could be weather, there could be detours, there could be accidents, there could be speed traps, whatever it is. The point is I still know where I'm going to get to, and how I wiggle to get there is really up to either whether or not I follow the plan, which normally I do because I'm not very good with directions, to find things around it and not go a whole lot out of my way. Systems. But this is the part that I discovered in college. Even when I had no sense of direction, none of these tools were there. It was a question of, I now know how to go to school. I know how to balance my time. I have a 5-day schedule, Monday through Friday, and then I have the weekend as backup. I have a 5-step writing system. I've written 58 books, many of them #1 international bestsellers. I have honed my craft to be able to find, and here's the interesting little quirk. They're very simple systems. Again, a 5-step writing process that has served me well for more than 20 some years. How to go to school system. I teach it. I lived it. I'm also one of the very few who went to school without student debt. That's quite an accomplishment. And part of this I can't take a whole lot of credit, because if I didn't find the money, I couldn't go. It was that simple. There was no being able to have huge student loans because I just didn't qualify. And so now again, I sit here with 4 college degrees, debt-free from educational debt. That's huge. And part of that is every degree that I have been able to earn has a specific system. The less time it takes you to earn it, the less time, the less money, and get to the good stuff. So I spend a lot of time with this efficiencies. It took me 4 years, 3 months to earn my doctorate. Many of my students, graduates now, earned in less than a year. Several less than 18 months. Some have taken the full time, upwards of 7 or 8 years. Question is you. It's choice. You put an effective system into place, you get there faster, with less time, with less heartache, with less money. Never really met a student who didn't want to graduate sooner, including me, and with less debt. Why? Because I want to spend things, it's called opportunity cost, right? The amount of money you can spend on one thing versus the amount of money you can spend on other things. The sooner I graduated, the better I got to the good stuff. And I started publishing and starting consulting and starting speaking all over the world. Those were the good stuffs. So I encourage you to add Daniel Goleman to your repertoire. Add Peter Senge. These are some of the masters that are absolutely amazing with how they teach systems and how they teach emotional intelligence and how they teach with how are you going to move forward. I mean, this is how I got over COVID. I decided that because of some of the symptoms, it was a little bit dangerous to be able to present when COVID brain's a thing. And as a college professor, I cannot tell you how annoying it is to be able to grasp and know there's so much up here and you can't pull it out. And so you've got to be able to use a little bit of humor, but a little bit of systems. And now what am I offering to you? Way better than it might have been, other than having a live synergy with everyone in the same room around the world. And we had over 100 participants just on my LinkedIn alone. And I will reach each and every one of you, however long it takes. But this is the part that we need to be able to look at. How am I going about doing this? Well, we have the digital age. So now instead of just having a live 1-hour session, I will have this ability to have this video for you and be able to share it with all kinds of people, to be able to introduce this system efficiency metric to you, to introduce some of these systems thinking with Peter Senge and Daniel Goleman, to be able to look at this idea of mindset versus skill set. This is an interesting topic that is often met with a lot of confusion in the marketplace. Think of the difference between a mentor and a coach. We talk about this all the time in my classes, and I'm always amazed at the type of confusion that exists. So think about a coach. Think about a baseball coach, for example, a pitching coach, that there's a specific pitch that the coach is going to work on skill set with the particular coachee, if you will. But the challenge becomes, how much experience does the coach necessarily have to be? For example, I like to tell my students, a coach knows the rules, a mentor's played the game. I could coach Little League at probably the Pee-wee level, having never played my entire life, but I know the rules and I know more than the 5-year-old. So chances are I'd probably be enough for their skill sets and their level for me to be able to teach them should that need ever arise. Going to the Olympic, not so much. The idea of skill set versus mindset comes down to another SEM moment. Systems efficiency metric. The idea is to get better at a skill, whether it's coaching, whether it's pitching, whether it's leadership, whether it's management. The idea is many people don't always know the right person to hire or to connect with. A coach is someone who's going to teach a skill set, a specific end result, that in 3 months we're going to improve your pitching game. In 3 months we're going to improve how you throw a football. In 3 months we're going to how you write your papers. Whatever that skill set, it's finite. It can measure improvement so that we can look at those specific SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Now, mindset's a little bit different. This is where I look at the idea of a mentor. A mentor is not going to teach you the answers. A mentor is going to help you discover the answers. Many of my students want Doc C to be able to give them all the answers, and sometimes it's not appropriate. The whole give a man a fish, you teach him today. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So sometimes I have to teach my students that I'm not going to give them the answers. I will mentor them, help them find the answers, help them understand, be more of a sounding board. A mentor tends to be someone who's ahead of you in the process. I'm not above anyone. I just happen to have a few more degrees in some areas, a little bit more expertise in some areas. So to me, an expert is someone who knows more than me. Lots of those out there. But we all have our specifics that we're going to teach. And so for mentoring, it's a partnership. It's a relationship. We were just talking in one of my classes yesterday of the difference between someone assigning you a mentor and choosing your mentor. Being able to sit down and have some ground rules. What do you hope to achieve by this? What's the goal outcome? It may be a management of your skill sets. It may be trying to be able to help you look at career progression. But it's all of attitude and mindset. I'm here to be able to help you discover it. I'm not here to be able to tell you anything, but I am here potentially to help you find something. Why? Find someone who's done what you've done and ask them to mentor you, because now you have evidence that they are where you would like to be, and you have proof that they got there. Very simple, very elegant, very efficient, because the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Like in college, it took me 3.5 years to finally figure out how to go to school, and then I graduated and I found it really mistimed. Wouldn't I have benefited from those skills had I known those skills freshman year? So, never realizing I was ever going to be a college professor, now having been one for 23 years, that's what I teach my students. I have all kinds of videos on my YouTube channel that will suggest different ways forward that might be more efficient. And so we look at this as, think like a carpenter, for example. You know, a carpenter never brings one's tool to the party. There's never one tool in their toolbox. They typically understand, because of all the failures they've had up to that moment in time, they go into a situation, they pretty much have an idea, if you're calling about a plumbing problem or a stuffed up sink, that they kind of have a general idea of what they might need. And so they bring the initial toolbox in, they assess the problem, bing, bang, boom, $200 later, they're out the door and they fixed your problem the first time. Chances are they have more tools in the truck and more tools in the shop, depending on how complex and how accurate your description might have been when you hired them. But the idea is, thinking like a carpenter is to be able to look at the most effective tool for the most effective outcome. SEM moment, of course. We want to be able to, what's the most efficient way? The plumber wants to be able to fix your problem relatively quickly because they've got others that are waiting. You want to be able to have it relatively quickly because you've got things to do as well. And so the idea is, what's the most effective way forward for both of us? You hire an expert because you're not willing to learn. I have learned to do a lot of home repairs with being single because it's very interesting, the fact that I never learned these things when I was growing up. I was the girl, and that was just not something in my family that I did. A lot of tool types of things, or what we would have called a lot of masculine types of learning in there. Now I have learned, and not just soft skills, but they're all systems. So if you want to have someone teach you something, you either hire an expert because you're not willing to learn, and there are lots of things I'm not willing to learn, such as plumbing, such as accounting, and a few other skill sets that others just tend to be better at those things than I am. So a great mentor told me once, do what you do best, outsource the rest. So let's look at the SEM metric, and to be able to make a list of those skills that you do really well. Things that you can teach, things that you're very good at, and then look at all your weaknesses, and then you have a choice. Are you going to work on your weaknesses, or are you going to outsource them? And there's lots of different schools of thoughts on those kinds of things. But we need to first examine the outcome, what productivity is. We need to set that intention. Sometimes the intention is simply a relationship. You need to trust someone, to be that safe place so you can really be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to share in a safe place what you don't know and how you want to get better. And that's really all it is an opportunity to connect with another human being who might be ahead of you in the process, that has expertise that you would find valuable. So calendar a time to talk regularly. Connect via social media and a specific resource in there. Maybe use some of these old school techniques. This is something that it is always amazed to me, that technology is always seems to be in favor of old school. And we're missing out on some really interesting richness. The power of a handwritten note, cursive, to be able to see that wonderful flowing style when someone writes something to you, and something that you can hang on your mirror, your bathroom thing, that's a little bit more than just a post-it note. When you are personally invested in someone else, you have no idea what that thrill can be. I have mentors I've known for 15, 20 or longer years. They light up a room every time I'm around them, even if I haven't seen them in years. It's that personal connection. I think in this digital age, we're often missing some of these connections because we're so busy with social media, and I'm not someone that connects as well as social media. I like that one-time opportunity that we connect, and then you build from there, and you have regular intervals, and you have relationships, and you know about their family and their kids and their trials and their tribulations, and you hold their hand and you walk with them alongside them. Because here's the secret: regardless of the metrics that you use, regardless of the systems that you use, we only go through this world but once. And it may not change the outcome for some things, but it sure changes how you feel when you know someone holds your hand and walks with you. This is what productivity truly is to me. Is yes, you can measure key performance indicators and return on investment, and return on equity, and all those other things that we teach in Business 101. But how do you measure the value of another human being? How do you value that skill set that a coach teaches you? How do you value that mindset that that mentor has and has been mentoring you probably since that first time that you connected. Human connection is something we really need to fight for. And that's what underlines all of these systems that you're doing for. I need to make that personal connection. That's why I'm offering you this one-on-one, and actually an interesting adventure that we weren't able to connect the first time and it wasn't live. Because sometimes things happen for us, not to us. And they happen for a reason. And I need to help you understand leadership acumen is about leading ourselves first and foremost. Think about, if you weren't willing to follow you, why should anyone else? And that whole idea of following someone is that connection. It may not change the outcome from a standpoint that a specific tragedy happened, for example. But having someone walk with you will make all the difference in the world. And that is something that happens in the boardroom as well as the personal home space or volunteer space. I'm a big fan of Steve Farber's work, and if you don't know him, you need to get to know him because he's got a concept that is just radical. And it essentially is, love is just damn good business. And I know we don't like to use that L word unless it's a romantic type of situation, but I'm with Steve on this one. I think love needs to be operationalized. I think it matters how you do it way more than what you do. The idea of, we don't remember what people say, but we always remember how they make us feel. If you think about any of the podcasts I've done over the years and the radio shows and the things that I do with my students, they will always smile. And they will look at, it's like, but Doc C makes us feel something. They will sometimes be frustrated if they don't get the answers they want. But the whole idea is to become what Stephen Brookfield says is the whole idea of creating good citizenry. And in this day and age, regardless of the metrics you use, how do you measure the impact, the importance of another human being? Leadership, you have to look at it, it's personal. A leader has followers, a manager has subordinates. To be a good follower helps you become a better leader. But you need to measure it in terms of, how do you measure whether or not you have people that are in your purview that you go to? Go to the person in charge, or you want to know the person that's going on? Think of, there was an old movie with John Wayne, and hopefully I'm not dating myself too much, but Sergeant York. Going to the person in charge wasn't the baby lieutenant. The person in charge that everybody would have gone to hell and back was Sergeant York or John Wayne. And so the question is, what is the experience you want people to have of you? Do we want to be approachable? Do we want to be genuine? Do we want to have that ability to care? Those are things we have a choice of, whether you're CEO, CFO, or the frontline employee. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, period. So when you're designing your systems efficiency metric, let me invite you first and foremost to create that system of being a human being first, of being able to sit with someone. Most of my students, when they share their leadership examples in class, not all of them have good leadership, and not all of them have good experiences. But all of them ask me, it's like, but Doc C, I go in their office and I see their amazing I love me walls. And they have all these degrees, some of them from fancy universities. And yet they're lousy leaders. How is that possible? Weren't they taught what leadership is? And I sit there and I smile because I hear this all the time. And the answer is yes, they were there the day they taught leadership. They can define it. They can take an exam about it. They can probably write a paper about it. The disconnect lies, can they use it? And this is where I often work with many of my students. Take something we learned in class today and do tomorrow. Yoda, try not do. Make sure that you're going to actually take action, because leadership without action is just that class you took in college that no one uses. That I love me wall. Mine's not in there in the background. Sorry, a different office today. But the goal is still the same. I want people to know I have a degree in leadership. I have a degree in criminology or criminal justice, and I have a degree in international relations and communication. I want you to see examples of what I learned and how I've become a better human being and a better leader because I have outcomes, I have metrics. But some of those metrics, as part of SEM, again, systems efficiency metric, is how do I do this efficiently? What's the most effective tool for the most effective outcome? Many tools we'll use. There's this concept in psychology, it's called satisficing, where the first example of the minimal option will do. For example, if you're hungry and there happens to be a sandwich shop in the building, the basement of your building, that will satisfy your hunger. It may not be the pizza you want, which is a half an hour away. See the difference? We have choices. Do we settle for the first available option that meets our minimum requirements? Or do we go the extra mile and get what we want? No one right answer, I promise you in there. But the point is you've got to learn to ask questions about you and those around me. The art of asking questions is just that, an art, as well as listening to be able to hear the answers. Again, the difference between skill set and mindset. Skill set, the coaches, you want to have a killer fastball. Mindset, you want to be a killer human being and to be the go-to person in your office because you want people to come to you when they have problems, to come to you for the good, the bad, and the ugly. A manager and a leader cannot fix what they don't know. I don't care how many open doors you may have and policies in your organization. If they, your followers or your subordinates are not willing to walk through those doors, it's not going to matter. I'd like to think that over the years, I haven't done everything right. I'm not perfect by any means, but I have established places where my students, my clients, my subordinates, my followers could come to me and share with me the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't always have to like it. Some of it's been shocking over the years and we don't quite expect it. I tell my students all the time, as a researcher, we have to be prepared for all possible answers, even the ones we don't expect, even the ones we don't want, and even more importantly, the ones we don't like. So I want you to be able to look at, when we talk about today as we're wrapping up this, is to look at the idea of all a systems efficiency metric is how we do one thing, is how we do everything. We just have a system on it, a checklist, a way of doing something that we have perfected, even if it's only 5 steps like my writing systems. Even if it's only my series of how to think like a carpenter, how to think like a plumber, how to think like a seamstress, for example, or a tailor, because not everything's going to work for us the way it worked for somebody else. So we may have to decide going, well, maybe I need to tweak things a little bit. Maybe I need to take a little nip here, a little tip here. There's always a high probability of success. There's never a guarantee of success. So I want you to be able to look at, when we talk about this systems efficiency metric, is how to increase your productivity, how to increase your leadership acumen, to look at the work of Peter Senge and Daniel Goleman and even Stephen Brookfield, as well as my favorite mentor, Steve Farber. There are so many amazing mentors that are out there, both skill set and mindset, for both coach and mentor. But the biggest foundational principle I learned was from Zig Ziglar. In order to get what you want, you have to help others get what they want first. So be the change you want to see in the world. Be that helpful person that's going to be always approachable, always available. You may not have all the answers all the time, and that's okay. We're human beings. That's never going to potentially happen. But we have to know how to find the answers. We know how to connect. We know how to love. And I know that's a tough word in the boardroom, but that's really the foundation of the systems efficiency metric, is learning the how so that you can get to the what faster. Because how we do one thing is how we do everything. My name is Dr. Cheryl Lentz. I would love to help you. Please connect with me over at LinkedIn. I do have Facebook, although I use my maiden name for Facebook so that my high school chums and previously, before I was married, would connect with me and they'd be able to know it. So Kulikowski, if you can spell it, just ask. I'd love to be able to connect with you one-on-one. I will include my calendar link for Linda to be able to send out to everyone. I will post it here, but if not, just send me an email, drcheryllentz@gmail.com. Very easy. No dots, no spaces. It's drcheryllentz.com. Very simple as well. I'm very consistent in most of my social media, except Facebook. Again, I use my maiden name, but I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Pinterest, I'm on Facebook. LinkedIn primarily is my go-to platform. But I do have email. I'll include my phone number here. It's a Vegas number, but I'm in Chicago. It's 702-719-9214. Give me a call. I know it's challenging, but I have always had great success whenever I've met a speaker or a TEDx talk, and I'd send them a quick email, and it was just always amazing that they were so willing to talk with me and so willing to share some of the things in there. And I'll even sweeten the deal one more time for you. One of my favorite books, which came out during my TED Talk, which was on the Farmingdale stage in New York in October 2020, was Failure Has No Alibi. It's a fabulous title, but it's not something that I wrote. It's by Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill, again, an amazing masterpiece, that all he did was go around the world during his time to find out what made successful people and why they were successful and how they were successful. And now Greg Reed has been going and working with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. So has Jim Stovall and other amazing mentors that I have felt along the way. And no time to list them all, but I want to thank you all for being part of my journey, because we are who we are as a result of everything that has happened to us and for us. And I'd like to offer you that not above you or below you, might be just a little ahead of you in the process. Learned a few things along the way. I do a lot with my coaching clients and my students, and would be happy to work a little magic for you. So please contact me, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to present to Leadership Global today, because I'm so sorry I missed our talk, but maybe this is a better way for us to connect, so you'll have the ability to watch this email or watch this video presentation via YouTube, share it with your friends, connect with me. My hope is to be able to be of contribution to leave this world a little bit better place than I found it. So my question to you is, how may I be of contribution to you? It would be such an honor and a privilege. Enjoy your time in your journey, and if I can make things a little bit simpler along the way, contact me. Let's see if I can have a little magic just for you. Again, my name is Dr. Cheryl Lentz. Thank you so much for waiting for me, and it is an amazing part to be here today with you. Thank you for the opportunity. Be safe, be well, be productive, and be a wonderful human being. Take good care. My best to you. Bye-bye.